Continuation of Pollyanna. Chapter 15. Dr. Chilton. The great gray pile of masonry looked very different to Pollyanna when she made her second visit to the house of Mr. John Pendleton. Windows were open, an elderly woman was hanging out clothes in the backyard, and the doctor's gig stood under the portagee. As before, Pollyanna went to the side door. This time she rang the bell. Her fingers were not stiff today from a tight clutch on a bunch of keys. A familiar-looking small dog bounded up the steps to greet her, but there was a slight delay before the woman who had been hanging out the clothes opened the door. "If you please, I've brought some calf's foot jelly for Mr. Pendleton," smiled Pollyanna. "Thank you," said the woman, reaching for the bowl in the little girl's hand. "Who shall I say sent it? And it's calf's foot jelly?" The doctor, coming into the hall at that moment, heard the woman's words and saw the disappointed look on Pollyanna's face. He stepped quickly forward. "Ah, some calf's foot jelly?" he asked genially. "That will be fine. Maybe you'd like to see our patient, huh?" "Oh, yes, sir," beamed Pollyanna, and the woman, in obedience to a nod from the doctor, led the way down the hall at once, though plainly with vast surprise in her eyes. Behind the doctor, a young man, a trained nurse from the nearest city, gave a disturbed exclamation. "But, doctor, didn't Mr. Pendleton give orders not to admit anyone?" "Oh, yes," nodded the doctor, "but I'm giving orders now. I'll take the risk." Then he added whimsically, "You don't know, of course, but that little girl is better than a 6-quart bottle of tonic any day. If anybody or anything can take the grouch out of Pendleton this afternoon, she can. That's why I sent her in." "Who is she?" For a brief moment the doctor hesitated. "She's the niece of one of our best-known residents. Her name is Pollyanna Whittier. I don't happen to enjoy a very extensive personal acquaintance with the little lady as yet, but lots of my patients do, I'm thankful to say." The nurse smiled. "Indeed, and what are the special ingredients of this wonder-working tonic of hers?" The doctor shook his head. "I don't know. As near as I can find out, it is an overwhelming, unquenchable gladness for everything that has happened or is going to happen. At any rate, her quaint speeches are continually being repeated to me, and as near as I can make out, just being glad is the tenor of most of them. All is," he added, with another whimsical smile, as he stepped out on the porch. "I wish I could prescribe her and buy her, as I would a box of pills, though if there gets to be many of her in the world, you and I might as well go to ribbon-selling and ditch-digging for all the money we'd get out of nursing and doctoring." Pollyanna, meanwhile, in accordance with the doctor's orders, was being escorted to John Pendleton's room. Her way led through the great library at the end of the hall, and rapid as was her progress through it, Pollyanna saw at once that great changes had taken place. The book-lined walls, the crimson curtains were the same, but there was no litter on the floor, no untidiness on the desk, and not so much a grain of dust in sight. The telephone card hung in its proper place, and the brass andirons had been polished. One of the mysterious doors was opened, and it was towards this that the maid led the way. A moment later Pollyanna found herself in a sumptuously furnished bedroom, while the maid was saying in a frightened voice, "If you please, sir, here's a little girl with some jelly. The doctor said I was to bring her in." The next moment Pollyanna found herself alone with a very cross-looking man laying flat on his back in bed. "See here, didn't I say," began an angry voice. "Oh, it's you," he broke off, not very graciously, as Pollyanna advanced towards the bed. Yes, sir, smiled Pollyanna. Oh, I'm so glad they let me in. You see, at first the lady most took my jelly, and I was so afraid I wasn't going to see you at all. And then the doctor came, and he said I might. Wasn't that lovely to let me see you? In spite of himself, the man's lips twitched into a smile, but all he said was humph. "And I've brought you some jelly," resumed Pollyanna. "Calf's foot. I hope you like it." There was a rising inflection in her voice. "Never ate it." The fleeting smile had gone, and the scowl had come back to the man's face. For a brief instant Pollyanna's countenance showed disappointment, but it cleared as she set the bowl of jelly down. "Didn't you? Well, if you didn't, then you can't know you don't like it. Anyhow, can you? So I reckon I'm glad you haven't after all. Now, if you knew— Yes, yes, well, there's one thing I know all right, and that is that I'm flat on my back right here this minute, and then I'll be liable to stay here till doomsday, I guess." Pollyanna looked shocked. "Oh, no, it couldn't be till doomsday, you know. When the angel Gabriel blows his trumpet, unless it should come quicker than we think it will." "Oh, of course, I know the Bible says it may come quicker than we think, but I don't think it will. That is, of course, I believe the Bible, but I mean I don't think it will come as much quicker as it would if it should come now, and—" John Pendleton laughed suddenly and aloud. The nurse coming in at that moment heard the laugh and beat a hurried but a very silent retreat. He had the air of a frightened cook who, seeing the danger of a breath of cold air striking a half-done cake, hastily shut the oven door. "Aren't you getting a little mixed up?" asked John Pendleton of Pollyanna. The little girl laughed. "Maybe. But what I mean is that legs don't last, broken ones, you know, like lifelong invalids, same as Mrs. Snow has got. So you won't last till doomsday at all. I should think you could be glad of that." "Oh, I am," retorted the man grimly. "And you didn't break but one. You can be glad 'twasn't two." Pollyanna was warming to her task. "Of course, so fortunate," sniffed the man with uplifted eyebrows. "Looking at it from that standpoint, I suppose I might be glad I wasn't a centipede and didn't break 50. Pollyanna chuckled. "Oh, that's the best," she crowed. "I know what a centipede is, and they've got lots of legs, and you can be glad." "Oh, of course," interrupted the man sharply, all the old bitterness coming back to his voice. "I can be glad, too, for all the rest, I suppose. The nurse and the doctor and that confounded woman in the kitchen." "Why, yes, sir. Only think how bad 'twould be if you didn't have them." "Well, Huh?" he demanded sharply. "Why, I say, only think how bad it would be if you didn't have 'em, and you lying here like this." "As if that wasn't the very thing that was at the bottom of the whole matter," retorted the man testily. "Because I am lying here like this, and yet you expect me to say I'm glad because of a fool woman who disarranges the whole house and calls it regulating, and a man who aids and abates her in it and calls it nursing, to say nothing of the doctor who eggs 'em both on, and the whole bunch of them, meanwhile expecting me to pay them for it, and pay them well, too." Pollyanna frowned sympathetically. "Yes, I know. That part is too bad. About the money. When you've been saving it, too, all this time." "Huh?" "Saving it. Buying beans and fish balls, you know. Say, do you like beans? Or do you like turkey better? Only on account of the 60 cents. "Look-a-here, child, what are you talking about?" Pollyanna smiled radiantly. "About your money, you know. Denying yourself and saving it for the poor, you see. I know about it. Why, Mr. Pendleton, that's one of the ways I knew you weren't cross inside. Nancy told me." The man's jaw dropped. Nancy told you I was saving money for the— Well, may I inquire who Nancy is? Oh, Nancy. She worked for Aunt Polly. Aunt Polly? Well, who is Aunt Polly? She's Miss Polly Harrington. I live with her. The man made a sudden movement. Miss Polly Harrington? He breathed. You live with her? Yes, I'm her niece. She's taken me to bring up, on account of my mother, you know, faltered Pollyanna in a low voice. She was her sister, and after Father went to be with her and the rest of us in heaven, there wasn't anyone left for me down here but the Ladies' Aid, so she took me. The man did not answer. His face, as he lay back on the pillow now, was very white, so white that Pollyanna was frightened. She rose uncertainly to her feet. I reckon maybe I'd better go now, she proposed. I hope you'll like the jelly. The man turned his head suddenly and opened his eyes. There was a curious longing in his dark depths, which even Pollyanna saw, and at which she marveled. And so you are Miss Polly Harrington's niece, he said gently. Yes, sir. Still the man's dark eyes lingered on her face until Pollyanna, feeling vaguely restless, murmured, I suppose you know her? John Pendleton's lips curved in an odd smile. Oh, yes, I know her. He hesitated, and then went on, still with that curious smile. But you can't mean that it was Miss Polly Harrington who sent that jelly to me, he said slowly. Pollyanna looked distressed. No, sir, she didn't. She said, I must be very sure not to let you think she did send it, but I thought as much, vouchsafed the man shortly, turning away his head, and Pollyanna, still more distressed, tiptoed from the room. Under the portieres she found the doctor waiting in his gig. The nurse stood on the steps. Well, Miss Pollyanna, may I have the pleasure of seeing you home? Asked the doctor, smiling. I started to drive on a few minutes ago, and then it occurred to me that I'd wait for you. Thank you, sir. I'm glad you did. I just love to ride, beamed Pollyanna, as he reached out his hand to help her in. Do you? Smiled the doctor, nodding his head in farewell to the young man on the steps. Well, as near as I can judge, there are a good many things you love to do, eh? He nodded as they drove briskly away. Pollyanna laughed. Why, I don't know. I reckon perhaps there are, she admitted. I like to do most everything that's living. Of course, I don't like the other things very well, sewing and reading out loud and all that. But they aren't living. No? What are they then? Aunt Polly says they're learning to live, sighed Pollyanna with a rueful smile. The doctor smiled now, a little funnily. Does she? Well, I should think she might say just that. Yes, responded Pollyanna, but I don't see it that way at all. I don't think you have to learn how to live. I didn't anyhow. The doctor drew a long sigh. After all, I'm afraid some of us do have to, little girl, he said. Then for a time he was silent. Pollyanna, stealing a glance at his face, felt vaguely sorry for him. He looked so sad. She wished uneasily that she could do something. It was this, perhaps, that caused her to say in a timid voice, Dr. Chilton, I should think being a doctor would be the very gladdest kind of business there was. The doctor turned in surprised. Gladdest? When I see so much suffering always, everywhere I go, he cried. She nodded. I know, but you're helping it, don't you see? And of course you're glad to help it, and so that makes you the gladdest of any of us, all the time. The doctor's eyes filled with sudden hot tears. The doctor's life was a singularly lonely one. He had no wife, no home, save his 2-room office in a boarding house. His profession was very dear to him. Looking now into Pollyanna's shining eyes, he felt as if a loving hand had been suddenly laid on his head in blessing. He knew, too, that never again would a long day's work or a long night's weariness be quite without that new-found exultation that had come to him through Pollyanna's eyes. "God bless you, little girl," he said unsteadily. Then, with the bright smile his patients knew and loved so well, he added, "And I'm thinking, after all, that it was the doctor quite as much as his patient that needed a draught of that tonic," all of which puzzled Pollyanna very much, until a chipmunk, running across the road, drove the whole matter from her mind. The doctor left Pollyanna at her own door, smiled at Nancy, who was sweeping off the front porch, and then drove rapidly away. "I've had a perfectly beautiful ride with the doctor," announced Pollyanna, bounding up the steps. "He's lovely, Nancy." "He is?" "Yes, and I told him I should think his business would be the gladdest one there was." "What? Goin' to see sick folks, and folks what ain't sick, but thinks they is? Which is worse?" Nancy's face showed open skepticism. Pollyanna laughed gleefully. "Yes, that's most what he said, too, but there is a way to be glad, even then. Guess." Nancy frowned in meditation. Nancy was getting so she could play this game of being glad quite successfully, she thought. She rather enjoyed studying out Pollyanna's posers, too, as she called some of the little girl's questions. "Oh, I know," she chuckled. "It's just the opposite from what you told Miss Snow." "Opposite?" repeated Pollyanna, obviously puzzled. "Yes, you told her she could be glad because other folks wasn't like her, all sick, you know." "Yes," nodded Pollyanna. "Well, the doctor can be glad because he isn't like other folks, the sick ones, I mean." "What he doctors," finished Nancy in triumph. It was Pollyanna's turn to frown. "Why, yes," she admitted. "Of course, that is one way, but it isn't the way I said. And some way. I don't seem to quite like that sound of it. It isn't exactly as if he said he was glad they were sick, but you do play the game so funny sometimes." "Nancy," she sighed, as she went into the house. Pollyanna found her aunt in the sitting room. "Who was that man?" "The one who drove into the yard, Pollyanna," questioned the lady a little sharply. "Why, Aunt Polly, that was Dr. Chilton. Don't you know him?" "Dr. Chilton? What was he doing here?" "He drove me home." "Oh, and I gave the jelly to Mr. Pendleton, and—" Miss Polly lifted her head quickly. "Pollyanna, he did not think I sent it." "Oh, no, Aunt Polly. I told him you didn't." Miss Polly grew a sudden vivid pink. "You told him I didn't?" Pollyanna opened wide her eyes at the remonstrative dismay of her aunt's voice. "Why, Aunt Polly, you said to," Aunt Polly sighed. "I said, Pollyanna, that I did not send it, and for you to be very sure that he did not think I did, which is a very different matter from telling him outright that I did not send it." And she turned vexed away. "Dear me! Well, I don't see where the difference is," sighed Pollyanna, as she went to hang her hat on the one particular hook in the house upon which Aunt Polly said she must hang her hat. 16. A red rose and a lace shawl. It was on a rainy day, about a week after Pollyanna's visit to Mr. John Pendleton, that Miss Polly was driven by Timothy to an early afternoon committee meeting of the Ladies' Aid Society. When she returned at 3 o'clock, her cheeks were bright, pretty pink, and her hair, blown by the damp wind, had fluffed into kinks and curls wherever the loosened pins had given leave. Pollyanna had never before seen her aunt look like this. "Oh, oh, oh! Why, Aunt Polly, You've got 'em too, she cried rapturously, dancing round and round her aunt as that lady entered the sitting-room. Got what, you impossible child? Pollyanna was still revolving round and round her aunt. And I never knew you had 'em. Can folks have 'em when you don't know they've got 'em? Do you suppose I could? For I get to heaven? I mean, she cried, pulling out with eager fingers the straight locks above her ears. But then they wouldn't be black, if they did come. You can't hide the black part. Pollyanna, what does all that mean? Demanded Aunt Polly, hurriedly removing her hat and trying to smooth back her disordered hair. No, no, please, Aunt Polly. Pollyanna's jubilant voice turned to one of the distressed appeal. Don't smooth 'em out. It's those that I talking about, those darling little black curls. Oh, Aunt Polly, they're so pretty. Nonsense. What do you mean, Pollyanna? By going to the Ladies' Aid and the other day in that absurd fashion about that beggar boy. But it isn't nonsense, urged Pollyanna, answering only the first of her aunt's remarks. You don't know how pretty you look with your hair like that. Oh, Aunt Polly, please, mayn't I do your hair like I did Mrs. Snow's and put in a flower? I'd so love to see you that way. Why, you'd be ever so much prettier than she was. Pollyanna. Miss Polly spoke very sharply, all the more sharply because Pollyanna's words had given her an odd throb of joy. When before had anybody cared how she or her hair looked? When before had anybody loved to see her pretty? Pollyanna, you did not answer my question. Why did you go to the Ladies' Aid in that absurd fashion? Yes'm, I know, but please, I didn't know it was absurd until I went and found out they'd rather see their report grow than Jemmy. So then I wrote to my Ladies' Aiders, 'cause Jemmy is far away from them, you know, and I thought maybe he could be their little Indian boy, some as Aunt Polly was. I your Indian girl? And Aunt Polly, you will let me do your hair, won't you? Aunt Polly put her hand to her throat. The old helpless feeling was upon her, she knew. But Pollyanna, when the ladies told me this afternoon how you came to them, and I was so ashamed Pollyanna began to dance up and down lightly on her toes. You didn't say I couldn't do your hair, she crowed triumphantly, and so I'm sure you mean just the other way round, sort of like it did in the other day about Mr. Pendleton's jelly that you didn't send, but didn't want me to say you didn't send, you know. Now wait just where you are and I'll get a comb. But Pollyanna, remonstrated Aunt Polly, following the little girl from the room and panting upstairs after her. Oh, did you come up here? Pollyanna greeted her at the door of Miss Polly's own room. That'll be nicer yet. I've got the comb. Now sit down, please, right here. Oh, I'm so glad you let me do it. But Pollyanna, Miss Polly did not finish her sentence. To her helpless amazement, she found herself in the low chair before the dressing table with her hair already tumbling down her ears under 10 eager but very gentle fingers. Oh my, what pretty hair you've got, prattled Pollyanna, and there's so much more of it than Mrs. Snow has, too. But of course you need more anyhow because you're well and can go to places where folks can see you. I reckon folks'll be glad when they do see it, and surprised, too, 'cause you've hid it so long. Why, Aunt Polly, I'll make you so pretty everybody'll just love to look at you. Pollyanna, gasped a stifled but shocked voice from a veil of hair. I'm sure I don't know why I'm letting you do this silly thing. Why, Aunt Polly, I should think you'd be glad to have folks like to look at you. Don't you like to look at pretty things? I'm ever so much happier when I look at pretty things. And folks, 'cause when I look at the other kind, I'm so sorry for them. But, And I just love to do folks' hair, purred Pollyanna contentedly. I did quite a lot of ladies' aiders, but there wasn't any of them so nice as yours. Mrs. White's was pretty nice, though, and she looked just lovely one day when I dressed her in it. Oh, Aunt Polly, I've just happened to think of something, but it's a secret and I shan't tell. Now your hair is almost done and pretty quick. I'm going to leave you just a minute, and you must promise, promise, promise not to stir nor peek even till I come back. Now remember, she finished as she ran from the room. Aloud, Miss Polly said nothing. To herself she said that of course she should at once undo the absurd work of her niece's fingers and put her hair up properly again. As for peeking, just as if she cared how. At that moment, unaccountably, Miss Polly caught a glimpse of herself in the mirror of the dressing-table, and what she saw sent such a flush of rose color to her cheeks that she only flushed the more at the sight. She saw a face not young, it's true, but just now alight with excitement and surprise. The cheeks were a pretty pink, the eyes sparkled, the hair dark and still damp from the outdoor air, lay in loose waves about the forehead and curved back over the ears in wonderfully becoming lines, with softening little curls here and there. So amazed and so absorbed was Miss Polly with what she saw in the glass that she quite forgot her determination to do over her hair until she heard Pollyanna enter the room again before she could move, and then she felt a folded something slipped across her eyes and tied in the back. "Pollyanna, Pollyanna, what are you doing?" she cried. Pollyanna chuckled. "That's just what I don't want you to know, Aunt Polly, and I was afraid you would peek, so I tied on a handkerchief. Now sit still. It won't take but just a minute, and then I'll let you see." "But Pollyanna," began Miss Polly, struggling blindly to her feet, "you must take this off. You child, what are you doing?" she gasped as she felt a soft something slip about her shoulders. Pollyanna only chuckled the more gleefully. With trembling fingers she was draping about her aunt's shoulders the fleecy folds of a beautiful lace shawl, yellowed from long years of packing away, and fragrant with lavender. Pollyanna had found the shawl the week before when Nancy had been ranging the attic, and it had occurred to her today that there was no reason why her aunt, as well as Mrs. White and her Western home, should not be dressed up. Her task completed, Pollyanna surveyed her work with her eyes that approved, but that saw yet one touch wanting. Promptly, therefore, she pulled her aunt towards the sun parlor, where she could see a belated red rose blooming on the trellis within reach of her hand. "Pollyanna, what are you doing? What are you taking me to?" recoiling Aunt Polly, vainly trying to hold herself back. "Pollyanna, I shall not." "It's just to the sun parlor, only a minute. I'll have you ready quicker in no time," panted Pollyanna, reaching for the rose and thrusting it into the soft hair above Miss Polly's left ear. "There," she exulted, untying the knot of the handkerchief and flinging the bit of linen far from her. "Oh, Aunt Polly, now I reckon you'll be glad I dressed you up." For one dazed moment Miss Polly looked at her bedecked self and at her surroundings. Then she gave a low cry and fled to her room. Pollyanna, following the direction of her aunt's last dismayed gaze, saw through the open windows of the sun parlor the horse and gig turning into the driveway. She recognized at once the man who held the reins. Delightedly she leaned forward. "Dr. Chilton, Dr. Chilton, did you want to see me? I'm up here." "Yes," smiled the doctor, a little gravely. "Will you come down, please?" In the bedroom, Pollyanna found a flushed-faced, angry-eyed woman plucking at the pins that held a lace shawl in place. "Pollyanna, how could you?" moaned the woman. To think of your rigging me up like this and then letting me be seen." Pollyanna stopped in dismay. "But you look lovely, perfectly lovely, Aunt Polly." "And lovely," scorned the woman, flinging the shawl to one side and attacking her hair with shaking fingers. "Oh, Aunt Polly, please, please let the hair stay." "Stay like this? As if I would," said Miss Polly, pulling the lock so tightly back that the last curl lay stretched dead at the end of her fingers. "Oh, dear, and you did look so pretty," almost sobbed Pollyanna as she stumbled through the door. Downstairs, Pollyanna found the doctor waiting in his gig. "I prescribed you for a patient, and he sent me to get the prescription filled," announced the doctor. "Will you go?" "You mean an errand? To the drugstore?" asked Pollyanna a little uncertainly. "I used to go some for the Ladies' Aiders." The doctor shook his head with a smile. "Not exactly. It's Mr. John Pendleton. He would like to see you today, if you would be so good as to come. It's stopped raining, so I drove down after you. Will you come? I'll call for you and bring you back before 6 o'clock." "I'd love to," exclaimed Pollyanna. "Let me ask Aunt Polly." In a few moments she returned, hat in hand, but with rather a sober face. "Didn't your aunt want you to go?" asked the doctor, a little diffidently, as they drove away. "Yes," sighed Pollyanna. She wanted me to go too much, I'm afraid." "Wanted you to go too much?" Pollyanna sighed again. "Yes, I reckon she meant she didn't want me there. You see," she said, "yes, yes, run along, do. I wish you'd go." The doctor smiled, but with his lips only. His eyes were very grave. For some time he said nothing, and then, a little hesitatingly, he asked, "Wasn't it your aunt I saw with you a few minutes ago in the window of the sun parlor?" Pollyanna drew a long breath. "Yes, that's what the whole trouble, I suppose, was. You see, I dressed her up in a perfectly lovely lace shawl I found upstairs, and I'd fixed her hair and put a rose, and she looked so pretty. Didn't you think she looked just lovely?" For a moment the doctor did not answer. When he did speak, his voice was so low Pollyanna could but just hear the words. "Yes, Pollyanna, I thought she did look just lovely." "Did you? I'm so glad. I'll tell her," nodded the little girl contentedly. To her surprise, the doctor gave a sudden exclamation. "Never, Pollyanna! I'm afraid I shall have to ask you not to tell her that." "Why, Dr. Chilton, why not? I should think you'd be glad." "But she might not be," cut in the doctor. Pollyanna considered this for a moment. "That's so. Maybe she wouldn't," she sighed. "I remember now. 'Twas 'cause she saw you that she ran, and she spoke afterwards about her being seen in that rig." "I thought as much," declared the doctor under his breath. "Still, I don't see why," maintained Pollyanna. "When she looked so pretty." The doctor said nothing. He did not speak again, indeed, until they were almost to the great stone house in which John Pendleton lay with a broken leg. And we will continue this story next Wednesday, and thanks for listening to Miss Retro Reads.